podcast is a live experience that is really laser focused on creating a space of conversation that will shed light on a wildly sexy collection of equality and diversity issues that are facing our world today and that are going to be waiting there for our future selves. My name is Marie, and although I'm the co-founder of @Revenue, which is a Chicago-based sales and marketing firm, that is not my focus for this podcast. This podcast is for fwd.rEvolution, a company that's forged from the social, economic, and domestic upheaval of 2020. Wasn't that a delight? I am a widowed mom, a CEO, a third grade teacher, a butler, and a bunch of other shit that I never signed up for. And I became a fiery ball of feminism when I started looking into what the female recession was doing and the dumbassery that comes with it. The mission of fwd.rEvolution is to burn the structure to the ground and grow something wild and wonderful from the scorched earth that is all around us, to fight back against the female recession, to empower parents and women to take control of their lives by creating new and sustainable ways of not only bringing money in, but having a great life with the families that they have. And we don't have to rebuild everything the way things always were, because let's face it, it was broken and we're revolutionaries. But disclaimer, this is not a radio edit. There is a parental advisory on this podcast because we will be using adult words. I hope you enjoy. Today, we are incredibly blessed to be talking to Kelly Nagle about power, not empowerment. Kelly Nagle is an accomplished nonprofit executive turned political scientist turned parallel entrepreneur. And after 11 years of leading nonprofit teams and organizations, Kelly followed her passions for social justice and international policy. And at the apropos time of January 2020, she completed her master's degree in political science, United Nations, and global policy at Rutgers. Just the little things she did. After COVID forced Kelly to reevaluate her next steps, didn't we all? She went on to build her own company and as well has co-founded an education startup that is so cool. I can't wait for you guys to hear about it, that prepares socially conscious students to lead social change. Kelly is the founder and chief impact officer of Uncharted Community and helps executive level women avoid burnout. You know who you are. And to be strong, successful leaders, both in the workplace and in their own lives. She's also the co-founder of Teen Think Tank Project, a student-run policy institute that fosters critical thinking, research techniques, and problem-solving skills to develop policy frameworks for real-life issues and empowers the students to become the future change makers. Kelly, you could not be blessing me more by being the first woman I get to interview. So thank you for being on Clutching Our Pearls. And I would love to start with, first of all, did I miss anything in your intro? Because that was a pretty hot intro.
No, I'm still trying to commit it to memory. It all feels so new and happening really fast. But no, that was perfect. And thank you. It's an honor for me to be here in such great company and an amazing, uplifting, empowering community. I am with my people. This is my comfort zone. So thank you.
Yes. Yeah. And I appreciate, we've had a few conversations and we totally jammed together, but I would love to hear from your point of view, just kind of what you're seeing that has changed so seismically in the past year.
I see positive and negatives. I think one positive is the exact conversation we're having today. We are talking about it. We are not being silent. We're not accepting it. We are looking for the buzzword. I love that you said sustainable change, a sustainable structure, because what COVID has brought to light is what has always been there, but we haven't really addressed. I see policies that put band-aids on certain issues, but what's broken open in COVID is a systemic issue of women's rights. And I know that we really vibed on the conversation of this she session, and just the alarming exodus of women from the workforce because of childcare responsibilities or loss of their jobs because of COVID and the economy and layoffs. But it brings up a bigger issue of financial security and disproportionate pay for women, or these culturally constructed and accepted ideas of gender roles within the house, and who, I'm going to quote, naturally should be exiting the workforce to take care of a family, and who should be continuing in the role of a breadwinner, which we've seen with this pandemic is primarily the men, even though women make up about 41% of the breadwinning workforce. I'm also going to go a step further into a realm that I studied intensely in my graduate career, which is gender-based violence and the domestic abuse issues that have accelerated and increased because of the pandemic and quarantine and lockdown. So there's a lot of different layers to this conversation, but I think, you know, the one that certainly is in the forefront is the fact that women just got knocked back decades of trying to make progress and climb the corporate ladder and enter the workforce and gain pay parity. And this was a debilitating hit that is not going to be readily fixed
Right.
unless, as you said, we burn it down and we figure out a sustainable way forward.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it was, but I get it. Listen, if we haven't made any strides in pay equality in the past 5 years, and we were still making, what was it, 73 cents on the dollar at last check?
Last I read was 82 cents for white women. That changes for women of color.
Yeah. Of course it makes sense for us to go home. Of course it makes sense for us to be the ones that lose our income and have to go back into the roles that we're supposed to play. God bless them, right?
Quote, eye roll.
Well, and when you pair that with things like being mommy tracked and being penalized for taking advantage of all of these benefits that were set up to make flexible work life happen, but the men get lauded for taking the same days off,
Mm-hmm.
and we get penalized, the whole system simply just gets set up to fail. And we've been set up to fail for so incredibly long.
Mm-hmm.
In your eyes, what is the difference between power and empowerment? And how does that connect to this moment in time?
So I'm a big advocate for self-empowerment because I think it has to start internally. And I see it actually broken down by gender. I think women need that sense of empowerment to overcome these culturally constructed stereotypes of what a woman should be, what a working woman should be, what a mother should be, right? So whether it's you should be raising your family or what you see in the media as this hypersexualized version of women, the noise is overwhelming and the criticism doesn't stop. No matter which path you think you're following properly, there's always criticism and pushback. So I think it's imperative for women to find that inner strength and that confidence and that conviction to plow through all that noise and create the path that they feel fits best for them. I think on the other side, for men to find empowerment is to be more open-minded about femininity, right? And be a support system in that movement forward, and understand that when women are not a monolith, that we're not following one templated idea of how we should be mothers or wives or leaders, politicians, right? It's a collaboration that needs to happen to actually affect change. I think on the power end, when you're not self-empowered and you're not confident, you lean on power to get your way. And I think we see that in all the social justice movements that are happening with the Black Lives Matter movement, the rise of white supremacy.
Yeah.
It's one group gripping to power because they lack that internal self-empowerment to realize it's okay for other groups to rise and prosper and have equal pay or have equal status. And if we can break through that need, that white knuckling to power that's keeping us from making change, I think we can start building sustainable frameworks for what will ultimately be a more functional and prosperous society. Right? We're not functioning well in
No,
this structure.
no. And I don't think we weren't functioning well before. And
Right.
so like that was my big kind of awakening moments of saying, okay, if we've broken this thing apart and we go back to the way that things always were, they were always broken. They were always
Right.
set up against the minorities and against those of diversity and against those that tried to do anything that was outside of what had been set up by the people that made the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to stomp my feet and get a little angry the way that I do. It's not a bad thing. It's just kind of who I am. So as you, like, I know that I have a very clear view of how I'm going to burn this shit to the ground and change everything because I'm just done. What do you think are some of the most important things to impact from a policy standpoint? Because that's not a place that my brain plays very well. It's policy. I just want to be the rebel and change it all and forget about it.
Well, it goes hand in hand, right? Like we need women who are going to advocate for change, who see something's wrong and doesn't keep their mouth shut about it. On the policy end, though, we need representation and we need diversity to really create good, sustainable policy. And what I see in our society right now, and I'm generalizing, right? I mean, women made incredible strides in the last several elections, more representation in Congress than we've had, far more on the Democratic side than the Republican side, but there were female Republicans elected to Congress this last cycle. We need the people at the table with the voices to give the proper input and feedback to really create the policy. And not to hate on men, but so many times women's policies are created by men. And even if you are open-minded and open-hearted, you really can't appreciate the woman's experience if you're not a woman. You cannot appreciate a Black person's experience if you're not Black. And so we're moving in the direction, but I don't think fast enough and well enough, where there is diversity at the table in building policy. We need to do more so more voices are included to put policy together that impacts them. There's a number of barriers from where we get here to there, to what I just described. And part of it is one, like I mentioned, women aren't a monolith. There is not one definitive definition of feminism. The one that exists, I would argue, is really constructed on a white woman, an upper middle class white woman's definition of feminism. But women are on different sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
Say that again?
Whatever could you mean?
Right. So we have to be diverse within the group of women, figuring out what feminism looks like and equality and advancement looks like. But then also women are on different sides of the aisle. You have Republican women, Democratic women. They have different values. They see different roles for women. They hold different issues at a higher importance and a conflicting importance. So that's kind of a challenge that we need to overcome just within the group of women before then we take on the larger policy, when we have the barriers of different genders, seeing different views, corporate barriers, other governmental barriers. But we need more women empowered to run and raise their voice and be in government and push for these conversations to develop meaningful policy. Now, if everyone can be empowered and emotionally stable and mentally healthy in politics, maybe we could all work together a little bit more and further policy, but that's a different podcast.
That is a different podcast. And I think, one of the things that really struck me when we were talking about the topic of empowered versus just having power is being empowered really, to me, insinuates that somebody has to bestow it upon you.
Mm.
And I don't know, I was born broken in so many fantastic ways, but I always just kind of had this raucous confidence where if I wanted something, I just went out and did it. I didn't, while I was a good kid, don't ask my mom, most of the time, if I wanted to do something, I didn't think about asking permission. And it was usually for the greater good. But when I hear all of these women's organizations talking about being empowered and that concept that that there's a finite amount of power in this world. And like you said at the beginning, that we have to take it away from somebody else in order for it to be bestowed or transposed in any way, is such raging bullshit. And it puts me in this place of, there was just the article that came out in Times last week. There was the news segment on NBC. And I feel like we're sitting around waiting for somebody else to acknowledge what the hell is happening. And that to me is a blood boiler. If we, as a collective with all of our different, beautiful, diverse pieces come together, what is the fastest way for us to make impact? Is it sharing our stories? Is it making sure that we've got, of course, those people in government that are there writing policies? And do we need to start a grassroots movement, or do we need to start from the top and push down?
Those are all really good questions. I think it's both. It's a grassroots and a top-down level. But there's a lot of power at the local level. And I think as a society, we've become more aware of politics and elections, especially the last election and even the one before that. But I think sometimes people forget or don't realize the power of local, and calling up your local legislators, calling up your senators and congressmen and telling them why you are upset and what change you need to see. And sometimes maybe we feel that politics in Washington is way too far removed for us to really have an impact, but we do have a voice. I mean, that's the beauty of democracy. It's the beauty of electing our own officials. So reaching out to our local representatives and sharing, whether it's individually or a collective group, your dissatisfaction with the way things are and what you want to see will hopefully move that person in the direction, because now he or she's representing you as the elected official. Also, more women running for government. It seems intimidating. Through my work with the teen think tank, I spoke to a political scientist who works for the Eagleton Institute, focused on women in politics at my alma mater, Rutgers. And she talked about how there's an intimidation factor for women running for politics, but there are a lot of different ways that women can get engaged. And one of the interesting things is women tend to get engaged in politics as a reaction to something they're upset about and they want to change it. I'm not going to assume to know the list of motivators for men, but that didn't really come up in a motivating factor, or a very distinct motivating factor for men running for office. But women tend to get enraged, like yourself, about what's going on and saying, man, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to fix this. So we can get more women into those positions, we can see change. Now, here's a little bit of caveat coming back to what we're talking about in terms of this session. You need money to run, maybe not individually, but you need to raise money, right? Women, as we're coming up in higher salaries and larger positions, we're becoming more able to fund the elections that we want, the parties and the candidates that we want. But we also need to have that parallel advancement in the financial sector and in financial security to be able to then support the candidates that represent us and that we want to see. So again, we're coming back. It's all connected. You can't really parse out one topic and solve it. So anyway, to go back to answering your question, I think local level, yes, it is important for us to raise our voices. We have a voice on the local level. But also the work that you're doing with, at Revolution, with the other women that you're working with a number of other groups focused on empowering women and supporting women, to come together and really push at that national level and show that we need change. I mean, I know that countries where women are involved in the economy, where women are lifted up, where women are part of the government, have a stronger economy, tend to have more sustainable peace. Who doesn't want that?
That said, women belong in all the places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the
my favorite lady.
And it's so funny that there are some things that seem insurmountable in the moment. There are some things that seem reactionary when we get mad enough. But we are not the first ones fighting this fight.
Mm-hmm.
There are trails of success that we can follow. And I know that, as I take a deep breath after this interview and absorb all of the things that have happened here today, the first thing I'm going to do is go out and start talking to my local government, because I went out and met my alderman. I went out and met my state rep because they're down the block. But I never thought of going bigger than that, because I've always been, focused on running my business more than being in that political sphere. And I think that now it's my responsibility to educate myself
Mm-hmm.
as to what has not been happening and what more I could be doing. But I do want to just say thank you for bringing a level of brilliance and confidence to this conversation that is remarkable. And I also want to thank all of our incredibly good-looking and intelligent followers and listeners. Everything has changed in the past 18 months. Nature moves in patterns of destruction and creation, and so does our society. So we're putting down roots and we're growing. And we are the loud, brash voice that demands a space at the table and a frickin' throne if we're in the mood for it. This is the fuel to upset the status quo. We are not disposable workers. We're not disposable human beings. We are not something that can be a side note in history. We are the logistical contortionists who earn money, educate our children, keep our families healthy during a pandemic, and don't beat people on a constant basis when we probably should do that more. But we're also those that have been expelled from the traditional workforce and have had to make our own way and our own living. And we are those that have been marginalized and othered in mainstream America. We're the square pegs in America's round hole. We are the mothers and the others. So I'm going to ask for your help. Who do you know that fits this vision? Who is that person that has been pushed out of their career, or that is ready to be one of those loud, brassy broads that we need up screaming on the hilltops, or connecting us to politicians or money so that we can make a difference? Because we've got a spot for you, and trust me, I always have a plan. This podcast and the revolution are part of not only my dream, but the culmination of my bigger why. I know that deep in my soul, what we do in the revolution is going to change the world forever. So I am going to ask that you take a moment, go to Forward Revolution, which is fwd.rEvolution.com, and follow us on all the socials. We'll get them out to you. Sign up to be a revolutionary. We've got resources for you that are going to blow your minds, as well as money. and choices, which equal power. Take action. Join us. You can't spell momentum without MOM. Thank you so much. We're going to make sure that you get Kelly's information as well, because you need to be following her. Her think tank project is going to change the world, and I cannot wait to see the brilliance that comes out of it, and the grace and fortitude with which she has put together this program is going to change lives and make those tiny humans that we wonder if they were ever going to stop being gross teenagers turn into beautiful parts of our society. By the way, if you are a teenager, realize that you look like a basket of puppies and you're adorable all the time. Stop worrying about the way you look. My name is Marie. I'm the founder of fwd.rEvolution. Thank you for listening to Clutching Our Pearls. Let's go serve some equity.